Howdy, I'm Jammer. So, as always, please remember I have begun a Patreon for this channel. You'll find it in the link tree in the description section below. There's a $1 tier month, or hey, if you would like to donate a little bit more to the show because you like it as an educational resource, you like it as a chance to help me keep making art, you like me because you think I'm funny to make fun of, and I mean, that's fair, I'm an easy target. Hey, whatever keeps you coming back, I appreciate you. So if you got $1 this month that you don't mind parting with it, throw some in my hat, I'd be really appreciative. So, I'm always saying I'm excited, but this is kind of fun for me today because my visual cues to the right aren't enough evidence already. We're finally, after about well over a year of this channel, hopping into Alien comics. And honestly, I'm kind of kicking myself on how long it really took me to just get into this. I love the Alien universe. I love H.R. Giger's artwork. I love the xenomorph species itself. It's a wonderful series. Now, let's also address something right off the bat. The Alien universe is kind of in a very tricky position because it's currently owned by the Disney Corporation after they purchased 21st Century Fox. That has effectively ended the long-time licensing agreement between Dark Horse Comics and, well, 21st Century Fox, and basically the entire Alien franchise. This is going to be a little bit of an issue moving forward because I like Dark Horse and I don't like Disney, and I'm going to keep my videos primarily to the Dark Horse world, which means, honestly, it's going to be hard to track some of these comics down. But let's keep it short because this is a single issue episode, and today it's important to go, let's see, we're talking about Dark Horse and Alien. What's the perfect place to get started? Alien 3. So, for the people who don't get my little dumb joke there, the Alien 3 comic put out by Dark Horse is honestly not a very well-loved comic. Now, my friend Michael of Ground Zero Comics could give you a much better explanation of why fans don't really like the Alien 3 version of comics that came out. It also has a lot to do with just the movie Alien 3, which is really there's so many interesting stories that could go around it, but I recently got these single issues in full, issues 1, 2, and 3, and I thought, you know what? Why not start here? Because, this cover is stunning, and as much hate as it gets, getting to the end of issue number 1, my first impression was, why did people hate this? This is pretty solid. Now, before I begin, I want to make sure I give all credit to the people who actually came out with the book. So remember, this is a Dark Horse comic. And then if you'll look right here, you will see writers, artists, a nice little tribute to H.R. Giger estate, and then, of course, a lot of promotion for the film itself. Now, before you ask, I don't know whether or not this comic came out before or after the film. I'm pretty sure it came afterwards, but you know what? This isn't a comic history channel. So, go online, figure that out for yourself. The internet exists for a reason. Today, I want to look at just Alien 3, number 1. That's fun to say. And try to figure out what formally I think is really interesting about it. Well, right off the bat, you probably saw it already, but looking at just this first opening page, it's stunning. On the one hand, the xenomorph has become, to a great extent, a kind of commercial icon in the fact that when people see the xenomorph, they recognize it as a kind of brand in and of itself. Xenomorphs are a species which has just haunted people's nightmares for years. I mean, H.R. Giger, the artist himself who designed the original xenomorph, originally included a similar sketch in his book, The Necronomicon, and a lot of his drawings and paintings and sketches tended to be from his nightmares. He wanted something that was visually arresting and really shocking and disturbing. But what's important here, too, is that so many artists that have come after him and after the original run of Aliens, which I promise we will be doing in the future, have taken the xenomorph into some really interesting places. Now, one of the things right off the bat that I find really interesting about Alien 3 issue number 1 is, if you can look just at these 2 pages alone, you can see that there's a lot of early play with the panel layouts. Now, again, why is that important? Well, because again, if we consider the foundation of comics as a medium, the panel is absolutely everything. If you're going to be analyzing poetry, you look at the words, you look at the sound of the words, the way they exist in relation to each other. In comics, we have to look at the way that panels are arranged on the page. And so you can see just on this first one right here, we have this gorgeous shot of this ship floating through space. There's a star in the background. There's this alien world. We start off with this long horizontal panel that itself is kind of floating in this empty white space. And then we see this part of the ship breaking off and going down to the planet. But even more than that, if you look at the slow progression of this part, we include effectively all the contents of this panel in two sort of smaller subsequent panels, creating a little interesting trick on the eye as we are the ship moving down to this planet while the planet then kind of swallows us up. And we're talking about a science fiction story. It becomes really important to understand how physics and space work and how we can tackle that narratively. Now, the general plot line of Alien 3 is it follows the movie Aliens, the second in the Aliens movie series. Alien, Aliens, Alien 3. The end of Aliens basically has Ripley, two other survivors floating back to the planet Earth, and we discover a facehugger has actually been on board of the ship. It causes a crash in the system. The other survivors of the ship are destroyed, and Ripley lands on a planet titled, as it says here, Fiorina Fury 161. Now, I believe the planet in the movie might have had a different title of it. Hardcore Alien fans, please check me on this and leave a comment in the description section below to make sure I'm giving you guys the right information. And I'll probably just include a link to the Wikipedia article for Aliens 3. But whatever the case, what's important here is that Fiorina 161 is an abandoned prison colony. And so when we actually get... Oh, and forewarning, you may see a butt, excuse me, right here. We observe the prisoners going about their life, and they eventually discover Ridley and the ship itself. Now, again, looking at this book formally, one of the things I really like about it is, again, there's still a lot of little play in terms of the panel arrangements, in terms of representing the human form. You'll note that it's a careful balance between the iconic and photorealistic perspective. The reason for this is simple. We're not wanting the reader to imprint themselves upon the characters in the story. Again, these are entirely separate characters. People who are reading Alien comics aren't trying to engage in a kind of identification experience. For the most part, they're fans who want to see average, everyday human beings encountering monsters, and horrific monsters at that. Now, moving a little far forward into the story, Ripley eventually wakes up and discovers where she actually is. And one thing we find really interesting is her immediate reaction is to mourn, but then also to immediately to ensure that the bodies of the survivors that were with her on the ship are quote-unquote safe. Alien fans will know what this means. But again, if you look at this two-page spread here, rather than create a general rigid structure, there's a lot of free flow along the panels, so much so that even down here, we don't even really have a panel. We have this big outer blackness and then these silhouettes of Ripley and the other prisoner talking to one another with that soft sort of bluish purple there. Again, we're kind of placing the characters in kind of like this dark, free-floating world, and narratively speaking, this is really helping the notion that we're moving into some other space. Now, it's an Alien book, and I'm 9 minutes in. I want to keep this video short, so I want to make sure I'm only doing a couple of examples from this book to kind of show you the formal elements in it, but, my AC has apparently turned on, so give me 2 seconds. Howdy, I'm back. Good news is, the AC turning on gave me an opportunity to switch out the book. First Aliens from Dark Horse Comics, I promise you we will cover it. But, as I was saying, this is an Alien comic, and, you know, people are coming, first and foremost, for the xenomorphs themselves. Now, if you don't know anything about the extensive lore of the xenomorph structure and its biology and all that stuff, Go out, watch the first movie, and you'll get everything you need. But, in case you don't, there are organisms called facehuggers. They look like little hands. They wrap around a victim's face and mouth. They insert, effectively, a fetus into the host, which then bursts out to the chest and eventually becomes, well, the xenomorph. Now, one of the fun things about xenomorphs is that they adapt in terms of their morphology, their physical makeup, to whatever their host is. Now, most of the time in the movies, you saw the xenomorph being this kind of bipedal organism because facehuggers were latching onto human beings. Alien 3 was rather interesting because, technically speaking, the facehugger latched onto, well, a dog. Well, at least in terms of the comic. But you see here, the xenomorph pops right out of the dog, and its shape is different. But also, let's take a look here. If you look, this is literally the halfway mark of this comic. You can see, I don't know how much you can observe the staples there in the middle, but literally at the halfway mark, the xenomorph makes its debut, being like a nice little structural trick too. But then also, this 2-page layout, everything is centered around the xenomorph itself, and there's a beautiful sense of balance in terms of geometric layouts, hello Jones, of the page itself. The xenomorph is the center of our attention. The sacrifice of the individuals is sort of pushed to the periphery, and at this moment, life and death are kind of intermingling. It's a beautiful, stunning layout, even more well accomplished by this careful execution of colors. Because again, right there in the very center with the xenomorph bursting out of the dog, you see all the textures of the guts, the body as it's coming out. It's glorious. And even though, having seen Alien 3, I wasn't particularly a big fan of this presentation overall, I still found plenty in this book to really enjoy. To wit, let's go to the last presentation of the xenomorph in the book, and again, why this is a really beautiful comic. Later on, the prisoners began noticing that the dog has disappeared, and then one of the other prisoners has disappeared, in which case they go looking for him. At first they think, hey, he may have fallen into one of the generator fans and, gotten chopped up. But of course, he didn't. And near the tail end of the book, literally the last 3 pages, we get this beautiful, full-page debut of the xenomorph in its full glory. Now, there's a couple things wrong with the morphology. You'll note it kind of looks like it has its tubes on the back, and the alien from Alien 3 didn't have those tubes coming out the back because it had a different host, but whatever. If you look at this, everything is working so well. To wit, the figures and the panels are sort of laden in this solid black background. So in effect, we have all of these figures kind of floating in darkness, and as they emerge into this darkness, we eventually discover the xenomorph, this full monster that's brilliantly rendered, but basically swallows up the entire page. And again, if you look at the way these panels work, we have 3 small ones before it then moves out, and we begin to recognize that these other panels are effectively enveloped in the overall panel of the 2-page spread itself, which is important because this character then is effectively dropped into the larger panel, which at that moment leaves him at the mercy of the xenomorph, basically means he's going to die. And then, of course, it pulls back, and we have the survivors going, what the hell happened? What the hell happened? But again, this layout is really important because not only do you have the important color work that really heightens the dramatic tension, but by laying these panels out the way they have, they effectively drop this victim into the pit with the monster itself. And then again, right up here in the top, we have yet another excellent example of why lettering is so important. Because it's not just that this character is screaming, he has to go, ah! I mean, he probably sounds a lot more horrified than that. Let's be real. I mean, if you saw this pop out of the dark, you would probably have a lot more to say. But then, by that next page, we end here on this. And we don't have the same level of play, but again, we have this darkness that kind of swallows up the character. The xenomorph is reduced down to just a smile, a shadow, its hands, and then we end on this beautiful fleeing. So, why did I do a whole episode about Alien 3 issue number 1? Well, honesty time. I want to do every appearance of Alien in comics before the Disney acquisition of 21st Century Fox. One, because I'm a little bitter bastard who hates Disney, but then also two, I love aliens, and I do not mind being called a basic bro. I know what I am about. I loved what Dark Horse did with aliens, with the alien universe. And for a great number of people, the alien universe was what it was because of these comics. And so, even at their worst, and don't you worry, we're going to be talking about some of the bonkers stories they put out there. These are really cool. And especially with Alien 3, like I said, there's a great number of people who don't like this comic. And much of the criticism seems to be about the content of the book itself. And to some people, I think that's probably a fair criticism. For me, I want to understand formally what exactly this book is doing, not just for aliens, but just in terms of the medium of comics. As a single issue, this is a gorgeous book, and anybody who thinks that this book is terrible and holds no value whatsoever, I'm going to disagree with them, and I'm going to point again to those formal elements that I pointed out here in this video. And it should be noted, this is a lot longer than I originally intended. I thought this was going to be just a 15-minute video, and we still have 2 more issues to go. So, in terms of issue 1, there's so much interesting play in terms of the medium of comics, and so I will die on the hill that Alien 3, at least issue number 1, is great. And if you care about comics, look for it, grab a copy of it, and go check it out. Alright, I'm going to call it a day there. Thank you so much for watching. I tremendously appreciate it. As always, please like, share, and subscribe, all that noise. It helps me get YouTube's attention going like, hey, there's people who watch. And then it also lets me know that there are people who actually watch, which keeps me, making these videos. Like I said at the start, there is a Patreon. It helps this channel as well as my own art career as it is outside of the channel. So please go to the description section, check out my stuff, and seriously, if you have even just $1 this month or $1 every month that you don't mind parting with, I would love the help. Now, in terms of Alien 3, I hate to admit it, I did have to go to eBay for this. I was casually looking through, trying to find some old Dark Horse omnibuses or just Dark Horse comics, period, and I stumbled across a full set of Alien 3. So I got it there, and also my hometown shop didn't have the full set, so I was like, okay, I've exhausted my local option, I'll go to eBay. I would encourage you, go to your local comic book shop and check their single issue bins, because, again, it's actually not that hard to find some of these old Dark Horse Alien comics. So go to your local comic book shop first, see if they've got it in the single issues, and then 2, they did eventually at one point put out a bound trade edition of Alien 3, so your local comic book shop might have a physical copy of the bound trade. Now, that one is out of print, so it might be a little harder to track down, but nevertheless, try it. You might get lucky. And then, of course, you have a public library close to you somewhere. Check out your local public library. If they don't have a copy of it, ask for an interlibrary loan form. They'd be happy to get it for you. Finally, in summation or in conclusion, thank you so much for watching. I tremendously appreciate it. Go read some comics.